Hans Zylstra. Thank you so much for coming to the session on Altmetrics and open science. We are starting a little bit late. We are not going to finish late. So what I'm going to propose to do is to keep the speakers to 10 minutes each and have a collective question and answering session after that, so we don't run over and no one gets less than the 10 minutes they've been allocated. So my name is Mike Taylor from Elsevier, and I'm very pleased to introduce to you William Gunn. William is going to talk about Mendeley readers and who they are and why they are doing it. And William has 10 minutes.
Okay, so let's see. This thing. Okay. All right, now the folks can hear me. So we've been talking a bit about all of these different kinds of activity data. I'm going to present and describe to you a little bit about. Oh, we can hear it? I probably should move it a little bit closer. Yeah, is this a little bit better? Nope. Huh, I just use that one. Yeah. Okay, can you hear me now? All right. So we've been talking about various different kinds of activity data. What I'm going to describe to you today is some of the nuts and bolts of Mendeley data and what you can do with it, what you shouldn't do with it, and what are some of the questions that are still remaining out there about it. So just as a brief refresher here, the way that you get Mendeley readers is a researcher will install the Mendeley application. They will add papers to their library, and when they do that, we are capturing, information about who they are, their profile as a researcher, as much as they've described it to us, and what documents they're adding. And each time you add a document to your library, the reader of that document goes up by one. We take all of this activity from the various applications by which someone interacts with Mendeley, be a desktop, laptop, mobile device, and we're on, Windows, Mac, iOS, Android, Linux, and we compile all this stuff into what we call a canonical representation of a document. So someone adds a PDF, we pull off the metadata, we cluster that document with all of the other copies of that document that have been uploaded by other users in all of their various forms with, different cover sheets and annotations and whatnot, and compile statistics about, who's uploading those documents, connected with the author if we can, various different identifiers for where it's found, et cetera, et cetera. And you can search the catalog and pull out this kind of stuff. And it's actually kind of nice because we can use this readership information to feed into the standard, matching algorithm. And we like to think deliver a little more relevant results for some things. So in short, a readership is an addition of a document to Mendeley. It comes with some metadata. It kind of feels like a citation in some ways, but you have to understand that the underlying population is different. There are people using Mendeley for all kinds of things, and so it's not going to behave exactly like a citation. In fact, if you look at the correlation of a selection of papers from PubMed with their citations in Scopus, what you find is, there's really not any correlation at all. If you think about it, you shouldn't really expect to find much of a correlation. Looking at other Altmetrics, you see that things look a little bit more like there's a relationship between the two. This is downloads of papers in PLOS versus readers on Mendeley. And when you break it out by discipline and you limit it to year, you can actually get some things where it looks like there's reasonable correlations in the data. So readers look a little bit more like downloads. But fundamentally, and this is some great work done by Jason Preem et al., showing the darker the square is, the stronger the correlation is. That Mendeley saves, so these guys right here, really, they're kind of like downloads or page views, but really the only thing that they're very much like is themselves and other social bookmarking activity. So we thought we need to understand not this paper-centric view where you're looking at a paper and you're aggregating all this information about the paper, but we need to understand the underlying population. So let's take a population of people, and understand what they're doing with their documents. That is going to get us past this kind of this sort of detour down the rabbit hole that we've gone with trying to correlate readership versus citations and versus all of these other metrics, which hasn't really yielded all that much interesting. Is to look at the underlying, to pick a population of people and look at the activities that these people share. So we have a population of people on Mendeley that we have curated. They are mostly early career researchers, as you can see here, mostly male. They are mostly PhD students, doctoral students, and there's a smattering of professors that identify variously as assistant or associate or lecturer or staff researcher or blah, blah, blah. And they're heavily weighted towards biological sciences, engineering, medicine, but there's quite a range of different disciplines that are available there. So we're going to provide a characterization of the demographics of these folks, and then we're going to select some of these folks and ask them follow-up questions, such as well, we can query our database and find some information like this. We're also going to ask them questions about intent, like, so when you added this paper, this particular paper to your library on this date, why were you doing this? What action were you carrying out? What were you intending to do? And so we're going to collect all of this data, and we're going to put it together, and we're going to make this data available as a data set for Altmetrics researchers, such as yourself, to use, to derive insights from, to study, and ideally to do better quality research, and hopefully to kind of get us past some of the log jams that we run into when we focus on the paper and all of the metrics surrounding it and not focus on the underlying behavior of the users. So we think this cohort will be a valuable addition for research in that respect.
Thank you very much indeed. That was awesomely less than 10 minutes. This is really exciting stuff. So as one of the organisers of 2 AM, I get to do this rather cool thing of when I see someone speaking at another conference and I think they're really interesting, I get to invite them to come to another conference. And I saw David speaking on some of the work he's been doing in supporting communicating open science in his institution in Brunel. And he's going to be giving a talk on a similar subject today for us. David, thanks very much. You have 10 minutes. I have post-it notes.
I'll just turn it on first.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, yeah. Sorry.
That's the one. Okay, great. Okay, good morning, everyone. I'm David Walters, and I work for Brunel University London. My presentation today is titled Institutional Services and Altmetrics as Drivers for a Cultural Transition to Open Scholarship. I'm going to talk about the services being developed by institutions to foster a cultural change in our local communities. I'm going to talk about new services that we believe are required in order to swiftly bring about this transition. In the first section, I'll begin by discussing institutional services as drivers for open scholarship. I'll talk about the development of services at Brunel geared toward affecting cultural change in our local community. And next, I'll talk about the evolution of our systems deployment that's facilitating this transition. And finally, I'll discuss how our services are being built around effective data management techniques in order to empower our role as advocates for change. In the second part, I'll talk about how social media and Altmetrics are rising to prominence in the kind of services we're delivering, and I'll talk about our aspirations for future services within this context. There's been an explosion of institutional services at UK universities in support of researchers and open access, And a somewhat popular phrase for us has been the idea of a post-Finch world, referring to a report advocating a gold-led approach to open access in the UK. And some key milestones for us have been the implementation of the Ask UK and COAF open access policies, and also the HEFCE policy, which mandates green open access for research assessment. And what this has done is prompted the implementation of support services at UK universities. For example, here at Brunel, we have a dedicated centralised support team. So we're now in a position to serve our academics across a number of different research support areas. Effectively, we're kind of like a frontline service, really helping our authors deal with a transition to a new models of publishing and the scholarly model. But as you can see from the list, only one of those is open access, and that's what I'll focus on here today. So, for open access, some key milestones for us have been the early adoption of an institutional repository some years ago, setting up a fund for gold open access for all our authors since 2008, the implementation of a CRIS system back in 2010, and the ongoing administration of the Ask UK block grant, which first came to us in 2013. So fundamentally, our role has been to lead our community as advocates through a culture change. And Open Access Week is a great example of this advocacy role in action. But this kind of one-to-one advocacy work should happen far more regularly than it does. Our services exist to foster engagement with our communities, and they work to engender open dissemination practice as the established norm. We're also facilitators of open access, serving those necessary aspects of administration, making reports and recording payments, for example. As facilitators are tasked are broadly split between reporting requirements to stakeholders and request-driven processes. And a challenge for us has been to minimise the impact of these processes, especially when staff resources are low. So, in delivering this transition, both roles are necessary, but facilitation has, up to a point, been the dominant activity in our service delivery. And being overburdened with administrative tasks has suffocated our role as leaders and advocates. And only advocacy is going to bring about the true cultural change we all wish to see. And what's still required is the systems in place to rebalance these roles for support staff, and more importantly, to remove the burden from academics so that time that could be spent on research is not unfairly taken away. The implementation of a CRIS system has been vital for the development of our research support services, and at Brunel we use symplectic elements. CRIS stands for Current Research Information System. It's essentially a database used by institutions to monitor academic output alongside local business systems. And you can see the diagram on the right if you've got very good eyesight. It gives a simplistic overview of the architecture employed by the system on a local level. And as you can see, all the feeds drawn by the system touch all areas of the organisation, but primarily this database monitors research outputs and associated research activity. Other key functionality is the way it brings data in from outside sources, ORCID, bibliographic databases, and Altmetrics, for example. It connects with our IR and our Figshare data repository, acting as a registry for all research activity at the institution. And it's already had a number of business applications. It helped us to do our ref submission back in 2014, and it also powers a number of our web pages as well. However, this system was not designed with our developing research support services in mind, and notably for us, some key community-driven data resources seem to be missing. For example, CORE, the repository aggregator, and Open Article Gauge, the automated license checker. So in the next stage of our evolution, this is where our service development stepped in. We came to realise there was a need to build additional processes on top of a CRIS architecture to support our service requirements specific to the needs of our community. So we implemented a CRIS-led data management approach to support the facilitation aspect of our services. We wanted to manage our data more effectively by making best use of these existing data sources. We did this because we wanted to curtail administration time and give scalability to this aspect of our service requirements. We wanted to simplify the administration process and achieve a greater level of understanding of our publications data over different dimensions, particularly, of course, in the area of open access dissemination. So our first approach was to try and apply some of these missing data sources to our institutional record. And this gave our data the required depth to monitor dissemination trends over the university's portfolio. And this in turn informed our own service response in real time, enabling evidence-based conversations with specific departments and a means for targeting our own limited human resources more effectively. So we also created a small database to structure funding and information requests into a coherent shared workflow. And again, this is a demonstration of new services being built around a CRIS framework in order to better serve the needs of our academics. The point is service building, which is something the library is very experienced in and has come to do very well. We're also proactively identifying papers that are under an open access mandate from the acknowledgement statements found in the Scopus and Web of Science databases. And this collation of techniques has enabled a greater understanding of the needs of our authors, thanks to our ability to analyse their publishing habits and our ability to identify trends in this area for the institution. And this is an example of some of our results. So you can see a breakdown of open access dissemination trends across the university's portfolio. And thanks to the architecture employed by the CRIS, we can direct this approach towards specific departments or research groups within our community. It's also allowed us to develop mechanisms for effectively managing complex financial processes. And we're also helping to improve the array of new data services that are emerging to support the transition to open access. So, for example, we're now working with the Open Article Gauge chaps, the automated license checking tool, to improve the performance of the tool against the publication platforms chosen by Brunel academics. Moving into the next section, I'll just touch on the clear mutualistic relationship that exists between alternative metrics and the transition to open scholarship. It's true to say that a link to a publication is more likely to be shared if it resolves to a resource and not a paywall. And open access brings scholarly research in line with expected usability habits of web content. And at the risk of appearing to ingratiate myself to the organisers, this is some research taken from the Altmetrics blog. As you can see here, essentially open access equals more uniques on Twitter when a paper is shared. So in effect, this is something that academics really do need to know more about, and somewhere where institutional services may yet play a role in supporting this. Dealing with researchers on a daily basis, we're well positioned to comment on the divide that exists between those who are engaged with social media as part of the dissemination process and with those who aren't. So there are a number of great tools already out there that assist with this process. However, success is largely dependent on researchers actively building their own digital networks. Obviously, you can't exploit a network to disseminate your research if one doesn't exist. Melissa Terras is an academic from UCL, and she's done a great job in documenting her experiences in this area. She's shown how academics can reap huge rewards from this process, but also illustrated the effort required in building an online persona. The university and library service in particular are becoming quite experienced at engaging communities through social media. And you can see from the slide, examples include our research blog and Vine channel that we're working to develop, and we're not alone in some of these initiatives. But what about university services moving toward developing social channels around research themes? Records metadata in the CRIS is curated to a very high standard. It's also possible to build research themes around this data, as was done for the REF. So why can't staff use this to form part of an engagement platform? However these services develop, it's clear that we can play a role here, promoting research alongside our institutional affiliation and possibly helping our research to achieve a greater level of impact. To close, institutional services play a vital role in affecting the transition toward open scholarship and open science. And related to Altmetrics, institutional services can play a much better supporting role for researchers in the social dissemination of their outputs. And that's the end. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I'm really happy. So far, I've not had to use my STFU post-it note. The next speaker is Kim Holmberg, who's going to be talking about measuring the societal impact of open science. I've got about 11, 12 minutes, so we've got a little bit of flexibility on here because William was so kind to finish short. Okay, thank you very much, Kim.
Thank you. Oh, I need that. Okay. So the title of this talk, Measuring the Societal Impact of Open Science, I understand fully that that's a very broad topic, and I'm not going to give all the answers on how to do it or why to do it and so on. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to briefly talk about a research project that we have going on that have just started. I'm also going to briefly talk about the background to that project or to the questions we are dealing with in that project, our view on connection between open science and altmetrics, and finally just quickly some very preliminary results on from one of the ideas, one of the projects, some projects that we are studying in this larger project. Anyway, this project is titled Measuring the Societal Impact of Science, of Open Science. It's financed by the Ministry of Education and Culture, by their open science and research initiative. So the ministry has a big push, or trying to push open science. They have a big initiative on that, and we have a tiny piece of that cake for this research project. Now, as I said, we are at the very beginning of the project, and you know how it's always exciting to start a new research project. You have all these ideas. So we have a big list. We have 20 ideas on our board on papers that we well, I'm going to say that we are going to publish next year or so. And this is the preliminary results, and I'm going to talk about from one of those ideas. Now, open science, we were just talking this morning while we were waiting for the bus about how open science is much more than just open access, and that many times it's more, perhaps even more important to share perhaps research notes from the research process than the final product. Taking screenshots from whatever analysis from the tools that you are using and sharing that might be more beneficial, more valuable for students and PhD students than the final paper that is published. And also to write in a style that anyone could understand. Now, Altmetrics and open science now both have their roots in the development of the web and changes in scholarly communication. Now, although citations are still important in scholarly communication and in the academic reward system, technically they are perhaps not anymore necessary. They are not needed anymore. And perhaps Altmetrics could bring some additional methods or additional, how should I say, complement the academic reward system in some way. As we had heard yesterday already, it's important to remember that Altmetrics they are not equal to citations in any way, but could be a complementary source. But there were some talks yesterday that perhaps criticized all the research where we have tried to compare or find correlations between altmetrics and citation counts. And I think it would be, on the other hand, very exciting to find one altmetric, whatever that might be, that would have a high correlation with citation counts, because in that case that could potentially be useful to predict later scientific impact. Yeah. But anyway, taking away the question of what altmetrics really mean and how they can be used, or can they be used for research assessment, there is also a side effect in a way when using altmetrics, and that could be the intense, what's it called, incentivizing effect of when researchers see what kind of attention the research that they are sharing openly receive online. And that could incentivize the researchers to increasingly adopt the open science ideology and share their research outputs. But a challenge is, and will probably remain for a while, that we do not exactly know who is creating those altmetric events, or for what reason they are creating those altmetric events, why they are interacting with research outputs. Now, we know that, or can assume that on different platforms, some of the altmetric events, they are created by researchers, and on others they are perhaps mainly created by the wider audience, the public, and on some others they are created by a mix of them. On some they could be, we also have to take into account or think about the roles that we have. I could be a researcher, but I could use online source for personal things, and not be a researcher when I'm sharing something. But this is, or could be, of course, a richness also, because we all know that citations are created by researchers only, and that is why studying citations, using citations-based research assessment, we can only say something about the scientific impact of that research. But we have no idea, we can't use citations to assess the wider societal impact of research. Now, to the very preliminary results, we had a quick study on how the altmetric events are distributed between articles in open access journals and other journals behind paywalls. And these are based on an analysis of about 4 million altmetric events. And we compared, or we used the directory of open access journals as a source of information whether the journal is open access or not. So we trust that list for this. And here's what we found. So we took just the average number of altmetric events on the articles from a journal, and we see that open access journals or articles, they have a slight advantage a big advantage on Twitter and slight advantage on Facebook. So more altmetric events. On these platforms, sharing of open access journals or articles from open access journals attract more altmetric events in comparison to journals behind paywall. While the opposite was found especially for Mendeley readers, and to some extent also for Wikipedia. But clearly Mendeley and Twitter, clear indications of that. So what can we say about this? Chances are that because Mendeley's or the articles behind paywalls are used by researchers, hence Mendeley is pretty logical that the result was discovered, while Twitter, the result might indicate that the attention comes from a wider audience. Now, interestingly, this could also, but we have to dig deeper into the results, could also be an indication or how should I rephrase this? Additional evidence of the quality of Wikipedia articles, that they are increasing or more written by researchers who have access to those articles behind paywalls. To end, shameless self-promotion. Thank you very much.
Kim, thank you so much. So on that, we have 7 minutes before we break up for lunch. So nicely timed. Thank you, all the speakers. I do have a question which I'm burning to ask, but first of all, I ought to check with the audience. Does anybody have any questions for William or indeed? Okay, we have a speaker. We have 2 questions here. I may have to wait.
Yeah, just a quick note about the results in terms of like the prevalence of Altmetrics as a function of the source. There is some recent study that came out like a few months ago that shows that there's an open access advantage in Wikipedia citations when controlling for impact factor and journal field. So it would be useful to compare the results. There's an archive preprint that you can look up, and I'll be happy to discuss this later.
Yeah, so I also kind of had a question for Kim, which was really around the timing of the events that you were using in this study. Would it not be equally parsimonious explanation that Wikipedia and Mendeley events often refer to older articles, whereas Twitter and Facebook are more kind of likely to refer to more recent articles, and that might explain the differentiation as well. I'm just interested to know how that was or wasn't passed out.
Yeah, the data for this was from 2012 to 2014, so not way back, but
A partial answer. Right, are there any more questions for the 3 speakers there? Okay, we go. What?
I mean, it's more of maybe a fuller answer, or just to say that when you're looking at that, when you're grabbing the entire like the entirety of everything that you got from Altmetric, and you need to really break it down by discipline, by year of publication, basically by every dimension, because the size of the samples in terms of how many biomedical things you have versus how many social science things. Like if you try to grab it as an entire set, it's hard to draw any conclusions from that, because there's so much variation by all of the different dimensions that you could split that analysis. So I know that that's very preliminary, but I wouldn't draw too many conclusions from around whether there's an open access effect there or not. I don't think we can say that unless you start really looking and breaking it down.
So I think I'm going to have... Yeah, I've got enough time to ask the question before I have to tell myself to STFU. David, I had a question. There was some research in the Netherlands a year or 2 ago that suggested that researchers are spending almost a third of their time doing paperwork for grants. And I was wondering if you had any ideas on how REF has been influencing that, whether people are spending more time on paperwork, whether your system is helping them to do the job quicker and spend more time in the lab. And now I can't see you. Where are you? Yeah.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. I think that's absolutely a really big problem that's facing researchers at the moment is all these different mandates and requirements, hoops that they're expected to jump through, sticks versus carrots, are really fundamentally taking time away from the business of doing world-class research. And that's really why there is a need for services like those we've established at Brunel and other institutions as well to really try and take that burden away from academics. In terms of the ref, that for us that's over and done with, but there's still a multitude of things that researchers are having to do in order to apply for grants and to meet the expectations of funding bodies, and that's really where we're trying to focus our efforts in trying to take away some of those pressures, because they've got quite a lot on their plates. Yeah. Not at this stage, no. But I think it's because they're all quite new. I mean, all the services at Brunel are quite new. The services at all UK universities are quite new. So I think it was quite nice in a way because we all sort of are working together to try and find a common purpose or a common practice. So I think it's not clear exactly, which lots of things are being promised in the future, but there's definitely work that can be done now in terms of trying to get an idea of what we want, and that is just to serve researchers as best as we can.
Thanks ever so much. I think we have 1 minute left for another question before we have to go for lunch. I see you.
Yeah, I just want to note that you talk about cultural transition, but you are advocating an institutional transition. And so I'm a bit amazed about, this is more general, how deeply influenced the British system is nowadays by the REF as a framework, and people are really almost giving up their academic freedom for being higher in the REF. I mean, deviance is really no longer appreciated.
David, do you want to come back on that? I'll run around the front, shall I? Culture.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. So obviously, we had the last ref was last year, but obviously we've had a lot of movement since then from HEFKE, and it's all pretty much we're thinking about the next ref. It is a very big part of where universities in the UK are kind of thinking, and what a big reason why so many of them adopted these kind of systems and trying to put these processes in place, because they can see the implications for income further down the road, even though we don't quite know exactly what shape or form the ref's going to take, or even if it's going to exist in that form, as an article last week sort of demonstrated. But yes, it's definitely the wrong kind of culture, I think, and it's taking time away from academics and the business of doing research. They're worrying about complying with mandates as opposed to the business of actually doing research. So fundamentally, that's what we're trying to do, is to try and ease that burden, as far as we can, in order that we're not impacting too much on the world-class research that they're doing.
Thank you very much, everyone. Can we have a big round of applause for our three speakers? And now everyone else but me can go and eat.